The Liberal Democrats chose, as you may have noticed, to make water the centrepiece of our election campaign, so much so that my right honourable member, my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, spent much of the campaign in the stuff. And we continue to champion a radical restructuring of our water industry because water is the most vital of resources and because we cannot allow a continuation of the poor regulation, the wanton pollution and abuse of power which have become hallmarks of the water industry under the Conservative government. So there is much to welcome in this water bill, including criminal liability for chief executives responsible for severe environmental failure, a measure that the Liberal Democrats, I will remind colleagues of, supported and indeed proposed here before the last election, and which Labour at that point refused to support because they believed it then to be unnecessary. We are pleased that they now agree with us. We are also encouraged to see proposals to see some of Ofwat's powers increased and a fit and proper persons test for chief executives, an automatic fining system which makes sense, the installation of real-time monitors, greater data transparency. All of these are welcome, all will help, but they don't yet amount to the radical structural transformation that is so obviously also needed. Now, the recent announcement of the Sir John Cunliffe review absolutely is welcome, but also kind of frustrating, because it suggests the government might well be up for a more radical transformation, just not yet. And the review won't conclude, of course, until next summer, after which, of course, its proposals will need to be gone over by many, including the Treasury, before hopefully, maybe, making it into a King's Speech, running the risk that the more ambitious Part 2 of these discussions might not find its way onto the legislative timetable in this Parliament. Now, of course, the fixing of the entire water industry and sewage systems is not an overnight job, but this does feel like an especially ponderous way to solve such an urgent and pressing issue. I'll happily give way.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way. He's talking about the perils of not acting too quickly, but given that it was a Liberal Democrat who was in charge of the water industry when it was privatised, does he not think that acting potentially too quickly in that instance may have been an error that we're all now paying the price for?
Unless we were surprised, to my absolute surprise, in power in the 1980s and early 1990s, I don't think that could be the case. I was at university with my honourable friend, the member for Carlisle at the time that happened. Neither of us were in government at the time. I can absolutely tell you that for sure. The British people rightly believe that they voted for a plan far more ambitious than the one that is contained in this bill, and they believe that they voted for it to be delivered urgently. The biggest mistake that Labour governments tend to make is that they are not ambitious enough, presumably under the impression they'll be in power for longer than they perhaps will be. So my genuinely friendly advice to the party opposite is seize the day, seize the moment. The millions who voted Liberal Democrat in the election absolutely did vote for ambitious and urgent change, and so we will not. Yeah, I'll happily give way.
On that point, would my right honourable friend agree that water companies not only need to be regulated not to protect profits but protect the environment, and also to support bathing waters, and that they should not automatically be de-designated like the wonderful Tone bathing water in which I was swimming the day before yesterday?
Yes, well, I commend my honourable friend for his swimming activities, and I agree with him. The regulatory framework should be used in order to improve our waterways, not to be stripping them of their vital designations. We take the view that it is our job to campaign with energy and passion for a radical clean-up. We're determined to keep our word to the voters and to fight for that action. Now, I just want to take a quick moment to say something that I feel is most important, because the people who work on the front line in our water industry and those who work for the Environment Agency, for Ofwat, they actually deserve our thanks and admiration. Yet because of the failings of the system, they end up taking the blame that actually ought to land here in this place. Let me just finish that point, and I will let him in a moment. The legions of people running our water system do a vital job, so I want us to get the tone of this debate right. We can be quite rightly outraged about how our water industry is allowed to operate, and at the same time be hugely grateful to those who, despite that system, do outstanding work serving our communities. So to those people, I want them to know and to hear we really value them. They are a blessing to us. They are not the problem. The system is, and we're determined to fight for a better system in which for all of those people to work. I'm happy to give way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. In a previous life, I drafted many of the amendments to the now Environment Act in 2021, and I'm sorry the Shadow Minister wouldn't let me intervene on her. And I was further sorry that she and most of her colleagues voted against every single one of the amendments. The honourable gentleman was very kind and wisely voted for them. But the problem we now deal with is when they talk about regulation, all the previous government did was cut the regulator off at its knees, and we're now dealing with the consequences of their inaction and decisions.
Point. I thank him for his service in the previous life as well as in this one as well. He makes very important points, and I would make the case, and so I'm going to come to the point he makes in a moment. But yes, there's no point having great regulatory powers if you've not got the regulators with the resources to do the job that they need to do. So the problem is simply this, and regulation nevertheless could be made better. So water industry regulation is split between the Environment Agency and Ofwat. That plainly does not work. We have two inadequately resourced regulators with inadequate powers being played off against each other by very powerful water companies, far better resourced and able to run rings around very, very good but very harassed people whose job it is to hold them to account. So I welcome the concession made in the bill requiring Ofwat to contribute towards meeting targets, the targets of the Environment Act 2021 and the Climate Change Act 2008. The first time, I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, when Ofwat will have proper environmental obligations alongside its business ones is absolutely a step in the right direction. And we've received promises, indeed the Secretary of State referred to them at the dispatch box just earlier, that this government will strengthen Ofwat's powers in ways that we do not see on the face of the bill. For instance, Liberal Democrat peers asked the Minister to confirm that the government would ban water company bosses getting bonuses when they had a major Category 1 or Category 2 sewage incident the year before, and the Minister in the other place said, "These are," I quote, "the type of circumstances in which it would be highly inappropriate for a bonus to be awarded." Very welcome, but, as I said, not on the face of the bill. I want to pay tribute to my Liberal Democrat colleagues in the other place who forensically engaged with this bill to make it much better, and I will also pay tribute to the collegiate and constructive manner in which the Minister, Baroness Hayman, worked with them. To be clear, though, Liberal Democrats will go even further and create a unified and much more powerful regulator, the Clean Water Authority, absorbing the regulatory powers of both Ofwat and the Environment Agency, but with many additional powers, including to revoke the licence of poorly performing water companies swiftly, forcing water companies to publish the full scale of their sewage spills, reforming water companies to put local environmental experts on the boards of those companies, and setting robust, legally binding targets on sewage discharges. And on the issue of discharges, we welcome the change to require data from emergency overflows to be published within an hour of a discharge. This will require companies to monitor all emergency sewage overflows and ensure data is reported to the Environment Agency within the hour. My concern, though, to pursue the point made by the honourable member a moment or two ago, my concern is that the Environment Agency is already massively overwhelmed. In my constituency, I see good people working very hard, but with Coniston, Windermere, the rivers Avon and Kent competing for time and attention, and indeed resource, with the ongoing work of building flood defences in Kendal, you can see that it's very hard for them to be able to focus. The Minister has promised, I think I'm right, I'll give way, sure.
And thank you for the honourable gentleman for giving way. He talks there about the Environment Agency both being underpowered and under-resourced, and clearly it has failed on rivers like the River Wharfe to actually address illegal discharges and to enforce the law. So does he, with me, welcome the fact that the bill is going to be introducing more support for enforcement by allowing the Environment Agency to recover the costs of enforcement from those offending water companies?
Yes, to a degree. I thank her for her intervention, which is very welcome, as is the investment that's promised and the way in which it will be provided. but I'm happy to be put right on this. But I think the figure that is used by the government is an additional 500 members of staff. The Environment Agency, that's one per constituency in England and Wales. It's not going to make a noticeable difference. So in practice, this bill could well permit a continuation of the current situation where water companies will be setting and marking their own homework with an Environment Agency without the capacity to even manage their current workload, let alone the new duties this bill will give them to monitor masses of important overflow data. So the regulator must be much better funded to do this well. Even then, the regulation rules must be watertight for the Environment Agency to make sure water companies can't pick and choose which information they release or retain. Now, the Minister also indicated that this data will be made publicly available and easy to access, and I look forward to hearing more detail of how that will be done. And this could be a very positive move, allowing citizen scientists and campaign groups such as the wonderful Clean Up the River Kent group, the Eden and South Lakes Rivers Trust and the Save Windermere campaign, and many others from other people's communities, to be able to hold the water companies to account to a greater degree. After all, knowledge is power. So we are keen to encourage the government to move forward with this. We would also like to see water companies publish the volume and concentration of discharge from all emergency overflows, and not just their duration and their frequency. So we would like to hear whether the Minister would consider including this duty. And should we really have water companies installing and maintaining their own monitoring equipment? We believe that the Environment Agency or its successors should be doing that, with the full cost of that work being paid for by the water companies. This bill makes almost no attempt to address the structure of finances and ownership of the water industry. Now, the Minister has indicated this bill will seek to change the culture of the industry, and that would be welcome. But cultural change will only come with a change the reckless profiteering that has been the norm. Now, Lord Cromwell and the other places, honourable members, right honourable members on the Conservative benches have said, put down an amendment requiring annual updates from water companies on financial restructuring they have done or plan to do. It cannot go unacknowledged that financial stability and good governance seriously affects the environmental standards that any water company is able to reach. And I'm grateful to my honourable friends from Witney and also from Bicester and Woodstock who have made these points earlier relating to Thames Water. And it's why I'm also grateful to my noble friend the Baroness Bakewell, who has submitted a Liberal Democrat amendment to the water bill in the Lords to create special status with special protections for Windermere as an exemplar of the standards we will expect in our waterways across the whole country. The campaign for National Parks Health Check, which was released just earlier this year, found that only 5 out of 880 bodies of water in England and Wales's national parks met the highest ecological standards, and that every single one of them was polluted to some degree. Now, Windermere itself received 140 million litres of pollution in the last 2 years. Amendments put down in the Lords, that we will present here also, will seek to tackle that. Water industry leaders must be forced to take responsibility for the care of these world-class lakes and waterways. Our amendments to this bill will ensure that they do so. Now, while the privatisation of the water industry was an incredibly bad decision and definitely didn't happen on our watch, I am not convinced that renationalisation would be a good use of public money or indeed necessary. I fear it would mean that we would have to buy the assets back, put up taxpayers' money and put that money into the pockets of those who'd already made so much money out of them without a single penny of it going into improving infrastructure. Instead, it seems wiser to move away from the current model and to ensure that water companies should be community benefit corporations, ensuring that all revenue goes into keeping environmental standards higher and solving the long-term problems of our networks. None of our constituents should have to pay for company debt. These were business decisions taken by those who took risks to make money rather than to invest in our sewage systems. They should bear the consequences of those risks. The current regulatory framework seems to leave water companies immune from the highest penalty, despite their repeated failure to meet their basic obligations to prevent sewage being dumped in our lakes, rivers and coastal areas. The current rules mean that, under special administration procedures, to remove the licence to operate for a water company would mean the regulator serving a 25-year notice on them. 25 years. Which is why we are disappointed that this bill doesn't go as far as we want, or as far as so many of the water campaigners out there have asked for it to go. The Cunliffe review gives us some hope of a more radical set of proposals to come later in this Parliament, but our communities are impatient for change, and a change from more radical than this government is so far willing to offer us. So while we see nothing in this bill to disagree with and much in it indeed to commend, we are left frustrated that any radical transformation will be at best delayed until a second instalment after Sir John Cunliffe's review. So our aim is to be the constructive opposition and to now... I'm in the final flow, but I will. Go on.
No, and I thank the member, and I do note he keeps referencing the Sir John Cunliffe review, and I thank the Secretary of State for that. Could I just ask, would he agree with me that he looks across the United Kingdom, because Northern Ireland Water is both a government-owned company and a non-departmental public body. And I want to assure Madam Deputy Speaker the water quality in Northern Ireland, especially in Lough Neagh, is nothing to celebrate either. So if the Sir John Cunliffe review could look at all bodies as to how they regulate and actually work water systems so they serve the public.
I think two things, apart from thanking him for his intervention. Thing one, I respect the devolution settlement, and it's important that we don't overstep what we're called to do today. I also, however, agree with him that the waterways of all corners of our United Kingdom are precious and must be protected. So I thank him for raising that point. So yes, just to conclude, for the Liberal Democrats, our view is that our job is to be the constructive opposition in this place and to now use the committee stage of the bill in an attempt to inject that ambition and urgency we feel is lacking from this bill so far into it. To millions of people out there who care deeply about our waterways, the problems are obvious and so are many of the solutions. So we call upon the government to accept the amendment we will lay down in committee in good faith and to act ambitiously and comprehensively and to do it without delay.